Welcome to Mama's Space, a podcast wherein moms can relax, reflect, and connect with others through their stories and experiences. Being a mom is a challenging, beautiful adventure that shouldn't be navigated alone. Join me as I connect with fellow moms about their journey into motherhood. We'll get down to the nitty-gritty and chat about the joy, the tears, the mess, and all the love that comes with being a parent. Hello everybody, I'm your host Brittany Miller and you've tuned in to Mama's Space. If you can't tell from my voice, I am sick again. I feel like we had a 2-week break and then the germs just came straight back. My husband is sick, thankfully not in hospital, and then Haley's been sick and she's been teething, and then I've been sick and I've got worse from Haley coughing and sneezing and sniffing on me. So I'm not going to do a long intro. I know there's been a bit of a break. Things have just been chaotic, but very excited to get back into it. Today's guest, I'm going to let her introduce herself. I want to preserve my voice a little, and I know that she loves to talk too. So we're going to jump right in. So Wendy, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your family?
Thank you so much for having me, Brittany. So I am Wendy, Brittany's mother. Brittany is my oldest child, and I have 2 other girls, Lauren and Justine. Lauren is 26 and Justine's 21. So I've been on a long 30-year journey with motherhood. Feel that I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and there are things that I wish I'd known then, which I would love to, which have been on my heart, which I'd love to share with you and your listeners, especially new young moms.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, raising kids, each kid is unique, and you've learned probably different lessons along the way. So firstly, why don't you tell everyone, and I'm keen to hear, what did you enjoy most about, or what do you enjoy most? Because not just because you're old doesn't mean we're not still needing you. We're here hanging at Gran's house today because I couldn't manage by myself, so yay for grannies. But what do you enjoy most about being a mum?
So, like I know some of your previous listeners have said, I really enjoyed the closeness and the special bond that you have with your child that is sort of nurtured and developed from the day you conceive, and every day grows stronger. And that, 30 years on, 31 years on with you, I feel even closer to you than when you were a baby, because all along the road we have dealt with so many different things together. So I really have enjoyed that. But when the children when you were all small, I really enjoyed watching your playtime, especially when you had siblings or friends or cousins over, just listening to the conversations that come out of your young mouths. And just often hearing yourself being repeated and being confronted by some of the things that you say. I enjoyed the fun and laughter at bath times. That was always really special.
I just have to say, I totally see what you're saying about when you mentioned things being repeated back that you say yourself. And I see it with Haley now, like when I'm reprimanding the dog or moaning about something, and then let's see her then interact that and repeat it in her play, and then moaning at the dog herself. So, you have to be careful what you say sometimes.
Definitely, and especially between you and your partner, your husband, her dad. The things that she's observing. Your children are always observing and listening. Other things, I really enjoyed the privilege of playing such an important role in the development of another human being. As much as a responsibility it can often feel overwhelming. But just if you step back, you're just so grateful for that opportunity. And what I also enjoyed was just knowing your child so well that you know how to comfort them. You know what makes them feel safe and happy. And also, as you grow as a mother, you become more and more comfortable with being uncomfortable. So your capacity just
That's
expands all the time. Like when I had my second child, I thought, how will I ever cope with two? And yet somehow, day by day, you step into it and you do what needs to be done, and you find your capacity growing, your love grows, your abilities grow.
Yeah, and I guess also you don't have a choice. So you just find the energy from deep within, or whether there's no energy, you just do it. And like now I'm sick, but it's not that you just have to keep on doing what you need to do for the family. Um yeah, and I like what you say, like about the privilege of helping raise another person and teaching them about the world. And it can feel really daunting in the moment, but I'm sure it's great for you now that you can look back and see now that your kids are older and how everything's kind of played out. Um, where hindsight can really do a lot and help help you enjoy it maybe in a sense because you can see all the hard work and the labor of your love.
Most definitely. You've often said to me, I don't know how you did it. So, um, Brittany's father died when she was 15 months old. He was killed in a work accident, which was obviously absolutely devastating. But the comfort, the supernatural comfort that comes, and the your mind just realizes there's nothing you can do to change the situation. And so you just surrender and you say, this is what it is. There's nothing that I can do different to change it. And so how do I want to show up? And for me specifically, what has stuck with me, because I wasn't even 23 when he died, was that I have this great privilege of living and he doesn't. And I wanted to, you know, take on all the joys and sorrows and tribulations of life because I knew how much of a privilege it was. So, and you were such a joy, I was surrounded with family. I had fantastic support from family and friends. And, we got through it. And then I met your stepdad and had two more children. And there was just always there was just always life. There was always life to be lived, to be nurtured, to be appreciated, to be sometimes endured. And um, I wouldn't change anything because it was how it was meant to be, and it has grown me and grown all of us because of what we've been through.
Yeah, and I guess also there's no point in trying to like think of what it would have been like because that's not the case. And so just trying to, while I can't imagine how hard it was must have been, but to just want to try to maximize the life that you were given despite all the hardship and just deal with the cards that you've been dealt. And so now you're a grandmother. So how would you say the relationship has changed in a sense, and have you felt like a shift from being mom to grandmother, and what has that transition been like?
So truthfully, when you fell pregnant and you announced it, while I was very excited, I was also quite terrified because I had just come out of a very difficult time of parenting your siblings, the stage that we'd gone through.
Take note, it wasn't me, it was the siblings who were the troubling ones.
Yeah. So I was sort of at my wit's end at that stage that when you announce your pregnancy. So I was quietly terrified. I'm sure part of it came through, but it was also because I was so overwhelmed with the challenges of being a mother that I thought, I don't know how do I have more capacity as to be a grandmother, and what expectations will be on me as a grandmother. And so there was time, obviously, to prepare for that, to work through that. And obviously, the night you were in labor was one of the longest nights for me, and just was pacing the room, waiting to hear that everything was okay. And when I first held Haley and just stared at her, I was just completely overwhelmed with love for this being. But it was a different kind of love, because it wasn't that, oh my word, how am I going to do this? It was, oh my word, I can just enjoy this because I'm not her parent. I'm a grandparent. And I want to be the grandparent who's going to take her on all these wild adventures. And I want to get her swimming in the sea and put a snorkel mask on her and just have sleepovers. And yeah, so I absolutely adore being a grandmother. And there's obviously also the new element of worry, because there's now an additional human to worry about, um, and to care for. But that's life. I mean, what a blessing. I wish that your father could have met Haley, and and I'm going to enjoy it for everybody. I'm going to enjoy it to the maximum.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it is different. I think when I interviewed Gran, and she was saying how you can enjoy them and then give them back to the parents. You go home and get your sleep. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's part of the life cycle, I guess. But if you look back at us being kids, and I guess you kind of see it play out now with Haley, but was there a particular stage that you really enjoyed? Like ages where you just really enjoyed that season? Um, and then contrast that, which season or period of time did you find particularly challenging? I think I can guess, but just to hear from you, what would you say?
So I loved the I found the early months difficult when I wasn't able to get a proper night's sleep, and you were just operating from exhaustion all the time. That was particularly challenging, although it was also so precious to have that small little human, that you could put in one place and they generally wouldn't move from. Yeah. But I found the nights challenging. I could face anything when I've had a good night's sleep, and I'm sure you'll all agree it is hard not to have the sleep. So for me, the bedtime routine was very important. Getting that work, that when it was bedtime, it was bedtime. I think my mother said the same thing. But I really loved from about 2, 3, when you can have conversations and you can reason with the child and say, no, we can't do that now because of this. And I see with Haley, we've been able to reason with her already, so that age was probably sooner than I thought. And even the teenage years were really challenging. And yeah, we will all remember what it was like to be a teenager, which is what I kept trying to tell myself. And but I think I made a lot of mistakes during the teenage years, looking back. Um, but we just try our best, and we had COVID to deal with your siblings. Um, that was a huge thing and has been for many young people. So yeah, the teenage years. I'm very happy when your listeners get to that age to give you some more insights around that.
Yeah, I I really just trying to navigate tantrums with like a nearly 2-year-old is intense. I don't know what it's like to try reason with a hormone flooded teenager. So we'll let those years slowly come on. You mentioned mistakes. Do you want to share a little bit more about that? What do you think has been particularly prominent in your kind of thinking back and reflecting on the season of whether it be the teenagers or even more recently with the siblings and with me?
Sure, no, but first of all, you asked me earlier in our preparation to share some fond memories. So I'd like to share those, and they were definitely our camping trips. Even though at that stage we were still married, so it was camping was a big thing. We loved going camping, which was harder to do in after the divorce, and so that Justine didn't get the benefit of that. But those Drakensberg camping trips with you were so special, and then with Lauren, and I think Justine might have been on one road trip. I enjoyed the hikes. We did some really nice hikes in the Drakensberg. I loved it when we went to visit family when the Holsworths were in Durban and Granny was there, and we went for some holidays there. Birthdays were always very special and are in so many people's lives. So waking up on your birthdays and arranging your favorite breakfast and presents in bed. I loved when it was a hot day and just putting a sprinkler on and you guys would run often naked through the sprinkler to cool down. I loved the Easter egg hunts. Um, I loved your music concerts. Brittany did some first class music concerts in our family.
Why are you telling the world about this? It is. I like look back and I can't actually believe that it was me. So I used to orchestrate these choreographed shows with like rehearsals and an MC and makeup and hair and all the things and lights, sound. It was, yeah, it was crazy, but that was me. But I'm glad to hear it was a fond memory, something you could enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, we got a program as well, and sometimes there were like 9, 10 songs on the program, which kind of did result in a secret eye roll between the parents, which I'm sure you may have observed. Another thing I really loved was love notes next to the bed. I would go to book club, and Brittany would always write a love note and leave it next to the bed when I got home from book club, sort of saying, I really missed you, so I don't know what was going on at home while I was at book club.
I miss you. I miss you. And can we get a puppy? Yeah, I'll never forget leaving that note by the door and ringing the doorbell and having a whole plan together of like, you were busy studying, dad had to work, so we would look after the puppy and we could play and have someone to play with. And yeah, but eventually we did get that puppy, but it took a lot of love notes to get there.
Yeah, so if we go back to what your previous question around what would I have done differently and what was those challenges that I wish I'd done differently, I would say as a parent, if you can be intentional about realizing you always need to grow, there's always something in your own development, in your own character, that you need to be conscious about. And if it means going to therapy once or twice a year, just to kind of process some new changes, because parenting does bring up a lot of things around the way you were parented and challenges you all the time to think out of the box. And so being comfortable with discomfort, as I said earlier, and what I would really wish that I had got on top of early on in my parenting was dealing with anger. I think now I've learned that I need to have some time and I need to wait before I respond. Which, when I was you guys were specifically teenagers, that's the one thing that I have the biggest regret about, was not managing my anger better. Um, and I think, to prioritize self care, because for so long, my generation was told you're selfish if you put yourself first. And the more that I've lived, the more I realize you can't give from an empty cup. So, my greatest advice, specifically to moms, because we beat ourselves over the back all the time, is prioritize your self care. The things that bring you life, make some time to do them, because if you're just giving, it's hard not to become resentful and to become absolutely just exhausted and snapping and irritable. And if you take the time to do things, and it doesn't have to be expensive things, it can be, hang on, honey, I know you've just finished work. I'm handing these kids over to you now, and I need to go for a walk. I need to go and have a coffee with my friend. Um, that's one of the things that I wish I'd maybe introduced much earlier. Although I'm sure your dad would disagree, because I often used to say, around the bedtime and dinner, I booked a movie at Cavendish, and I'd go off and I'd sit at Cavendish and watch a movie, the 5 o'clock movie, by myself, and come back when all of the dinner and the baths were done. And that was one of the things that I did do from younger.
Yeah, it's hard because like the guilt associated with taking time to do stuff for yourself, but at the same time, if you don't, you you go crazy and then you lash out and snap, as you mentioned. And yeah, the rage is also, I'm sure a lot of all moms can relate to that, and the rage and the anger that you feel when you're tired and exhausted and trying to reason with someone who can't reason because they haven't developed that part of their brain, but it's so hard not to get lost in that. And then, yeah, but I mean, you say kind of step back and wait to react. It is like, I'm trying to think of the scenario and how that would act out, because I know that's something that I'm sitting with at the moment, is like getting frustrated with Haley, and she's been sick and very clingy, and you're trying to give her whatever she wants and cook for her, and then she's like hanging on your leg and you can't, and it's it's challenging. So maybe just for myself, how would see that advice you mentioned? How would that play out? Let's go through a scenario of me, toddler, and I'm feeling really frustrated and angry and cross. Talk me through that.
Well, I was fortunate in that from so I was one of the moms who made a decision that I was going to work and be a mom. It was never in my mind. I had no doubt that I would be able to do both because I had studied. I had an idea of how much I enjoyed accounting, bookkeeping, and I wanted to find work where I could earn and contribute to the household, but also so I was fortunate enough to have a housekeeper from when you were small. I only did about 2 3 months of full time work, and from the when you were 4 or 5 months old, I was working half day, and for me, I found that to be the best. Because I could have my brain stimulated, I could interact with other adults, and then come home and be a mom because I had what I thought was good childcare in place. There was a few years where I stayed at home full time, and your stepdad encouraged me to finish my studies, so that was also a very good time. But I had help, so it would, for me, the way I see it working out would be on the days when which I think you are doing, when you know you have Carmea coming over or Linda's there, you take that time, and often it's doing chores,
Yeah.
shopping or whatever. So to be intentional about, actually it's not always going to be chores. It's actually might even be something that I enjoy doing, like just going and walking around an art shop, or go to Kirstenbosch and have a cup of coffee and walk around the herb garden or something. So, but if you're alone, it is harder. When Haley's a bit older, I'm not sure when you start introducing timeouts, but maybe you could also just sometimes say, "Mommy needs a timeout." Mommy's just going to sit and think about what you're doing now because I don't like it, and I'm going to tell you just now why I don't like it.
And this child understands, so you would probably say that to her and she'll understand it, which is scary at this age. But yeah, I mean, you do make a good point in that having help makes a big difference. But not everyone has that so it's like, what do you do then when you don't have help regularly? Um, just thinking of this now, because I think a lot of people that I'm chatting to at the moment are navigating the idea of going back to work, or I mean, even just with me and leaving Linda, but for an hour or two, on the days she's around. How did you go about choosing and trusting someone to be with your kids when you couldn't be there? Because that can be a big thing, and never mind just letting go, but also finding someone that you can trust.
So the first housekeeper that I hired, you do the interview, you ask around. Generally, it's somebody that you know who's recommending somebody. You meet with them, you see the feeling that you get from them. Um, yeah, that happened for me. I've had mainly two amazing women who, for the first lady, looked after you, and then Veronica, who was around when Lauren and when Justine was born. And you see how your children are with that person. You go out for shorter amounts of time. When you come back, you observe. Um, and I was just very fortunate to find special ladies. And they are, women, South African women, Zimbabwean women, Malawian women. They're such beautiful women and such caring, nurturing people. Our children are very fortunate to have. When it comes to a preschool, also to go to the preschool, watch, see what's happening, see how the other children are, maybe speak to a couple of other moms, get a sense of how you feel. And there are amazing preschools around in Cape Town. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of amazing people out there. It's just the journey of trying to find someone. But I'm glad that you did. And yeah, I mean, Veronica was lovely. I remember her. She lived with us for years in the church house. But yeah, so kind of in just looking back, and like, what do you think surprised you the most about? I mean, you might have to think about this because it's 31 years ago, but we have these ideas and expectations of what it'll be like to be a parent, and then that baby is born and you hit the ground running. What was there something in particular that surprised you the most about becoming a parent and becoming a mom, um, that you can recall?
yes, I would say it's how, um, as as women specifically, I'm not speaking to dads, but as women, we have that innate capacity to to give and to sacrifice and to put another person's interests above our own, far beyond. And that capacity surprised me so much, because first it's one little person in your life, and then if you have more children, it's another and another, and you're just completely astounded at how you find a way to give to another little human while trying to keep the care of everyone else in your family, um, as well. So to hold all of that together, and to be able to give, I think that was the one thing that surprised me the most about being a parent.
Hmm. Yeah, we do we touched on it earlier, but regardless of how you're feeling or whatever's going on, you do because you have to. And it's, I think it's an amazing ability that we have, that we can just do that, and you just find it from within somewhere, or you just carry on and plod on and do what needs to be done, even if you feel like you can't, because you don't have a choice. You've got these people who need you. Um, but that, I think it does kind of make us superwomen in a sense that we are able to do that somehow. Can't really explain it. It's just there, and we just do it. Um, but yeah, so like thinking of children and having siblings and all that, how so we have a 5-year age gap between me and my middle sister, and then there's 10 years between me and my younger sister. And for me, that just sounds very exhausting, because I was like nearly finished with school, and Justine, my younger sister, was starting school. And yeah, I mean, so what kind of helped you make the decisions around the timing of your 3 children and how you wanted to do that? Because there's people who think just get it done quickly within like a few years of each other so you can get that stage over with. But then there's other people who think very differently and want to have bigger spaces between their kids so that they can enjoy their children more, and the eldest can be more independent when the youngest arrives, which is kind of what happened in our family. But yeah, talk me through that process for you.
So I don't think there was real choice. It was more situational. So When your dad died when you were small, um, I wanted to remarry and have more children, but you wait to see what's going to happen, and you're dealing with the grief, and you building a new way of life. So then when I met your dad and we got married, we agreed that we wouldn't have children until we'd been married for a year. So it was quite quick generally from when you meet someone. We dated for just under 2 years. And then as soon as we were had our first wedding anniversary, we started trying for Lauren. And in Mark's mind, I think it was pretty much the family was done with two. But because I was one of three children, when we went back to Johannesburg for your grandmother's 50th, I remember just observing this richness of these three daughters and their children, and how my mom and dad were so rich with that, and thinking, oh, maybe I think we need a third. I think I'm not finished yet. But it took a lot of convincing to get your dad. So that was also situational. There was I enjoyed the big gaps because I felt like I could give each one of you sufficient attention for you and Lauren. But then when Justine came along, it was just like organized chaos because you were a teenager, Lauren was Lauren, and um but when I reflect on it now, I think it kept me younger longer because I was in school young for longer with you, and you meet so many, especially after the divorce. Most of my friendships was around the school and watching netball and watching water polo. So I loved the school years. They were tough. School, the whole routine of school and the fact that it was relentless, but I just enjoyed the school years. I enjoyed all the concerts and the awards and the sports, and I enjoyed the car rides, even when someone was generally in a foul mood. Just the conversation, or listening to the conversation with friends when you're transporting to different events. There's so much you learn about your kids during the school years. So I really enjoyed that. But if I look at parents who have children close together, I often have the hugest admiration because I think one child in nappies is enough. Potty train and then maybe start over. But I think there's all different ways to do the navigation of being a family. And I think that leads me to one of the things that I wanted to share with is that you have to have the courage to do what works for you. Because in our day, we had no Instagram, we had no Facebook, we had no internet. We just had to work things out with a few books, a few friends' advice, our parents' advice. Nowadays, there's just too much information. And so you can have, I think one of your listeners spoke about analysis paralysis. There's so much that's coming at you. But to actually just sometimes stop, say what is it that what is one of my core beliefs? What is one of my non-negotiables in this journey? And to have the courage to do that. And not to be so bogged down with other people's advice. Even me, when I know if you ask me for advice and I give it, I don't expect you to take it because I know you need to work out what works for you and what works for Haley and what works with you and Simon together. So have that courage.
Do you feel like it was easier in a sense to be raising kids a few years ago compared to now? Or do you think that there's more good of trying to raise kids in this day and age than there was before, if that makes sense?
Without a doubt, I believe it is much more difficult in this modern age with the amount of information that's out there and in your face all the time, and with the amount of news coverage. We knew that there were bad things happening on in the world, but the news slot would be on from 7 to 7:30, and that was it. Unless you listened to some radio broadcasts and you occasionally read a newspaper. Nowadays, there's just too much information, which is I think why you also have agreed. I've tried to cut back on my time because it's just overwhelming. And I think specifically with children, especially when children are are faced with all that information. I have no doubt that the anxiety that your siblings have struggled with over the last while has been as well as consequences of divorce and being away from their dad was the fact that they had cell phones when they were too young. And one of my greatest regrets is not curbing their cell phone time, because it's too much. The brain is just completely overwhelmed by all that information.
Yeah, because everything's just coming at you all the time, and it's hard to like switch it off. And it's also hard, and I think something we're going to have to navigate over the years is also everything is online, everything uses technology. So whether it be schools and activities and stuff around that, you need to have a device, and even like just socially, all your friends have it, and your friends are on this chat, and your friends are sending each other stuff and planning things. And if you don't have a device, how do you be included in that? And I think that's a big topic that parents need to research into and navigate. It's going to be ahead of us because you can't not have it, but how do you strike a balance so that it doesn't completely consume you and fry your brain with just all that knowledge and information? Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't look forward to that. But at least I think we have a bit of time before we have to have those more serious conversations with Simon. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot, but you've kind of mentioned it on a couple of takeaways and things that you've learned and what you would want to share in your hindsight and share your information and advice with parents. But people navigating the new year. So I've got a friend who just has had a baby, and even just in a year and a half, or nearly 2 years now, but being able to look back and see and reflect on how it was with Haley in those early days. There's so much to learn, and while I think you definitely have to navigate it on your own and work and find out what works for you and your baby and your family, it is helpful to have a bit of advice, I guess. And so you mentioned some things, but are there other things that you would advise people who are navigating those first few years of being parents and maintaining relationships and friendships and all the things?
Well, first and foremost, I know that I could not have coped or survived and got through these years without a spiritual belief. Whatever your spiritual belief is, that I believe that I wasn't alone. I believe that I could call on um, the person I know as God when I needed help, when I knew my children needed help, for guidance, for when you're just on the floor crying or trying to hide your tears when the children are having a nap or when they've gone to bed and you're crying in the bathroom. For me, it was absolutely clear that I was not on the journey alone. There was a higher power for me, and that is what I wish for all parents to know. Um, and obviously, you have family. Some people have more dysfunctional families than others, but you need to find your tribe. They say it takes a village, and it absolutely takes a village. So you need to find who are those persons. I had two other mothers that I met through the primary school years. We're still friends now, and we would make a point of meeting, if not once a week, at least every second week, and that would just be a time to vent. She did this, she said that, I feel like this, he did that, and you just kind of get it all out over the coffee. You have a few tears and a lot of laughter, and that was absolutely my saving grace as well.
Therapy.
Yeah, that was therapy. And I think for me, also, you often think, okay, well, should you be taking advice from somebody who's been divorced? But I think there's a lot of lessons that Mark and I learned, um, that and the one that I would really take home now, and I wish I had known more then, was not to expect your spouse to solve your unhappiness, to be intentional about knowing yourself well enough to knowing what you need And yes, your spouse is there to love and care and nurture and support you, but they're not there to make you happy. And I know that that is definitely one of the lessons that I learned post divorce. Um, there are so many things about your partner that bring you joy, but they're not responsible for making you happy in the moment. And communication with your friends, communication with your spouse, and just once again going back to the courage. You know that that person said this is something that was invaluable, but in your heart of hearts you know it's not going to work for me. um, to have the courage to process, to think, to grapple, to pray, to, you know, just work out what works
Yes.
for you. And definitely each child is different, and you know that your eldest child is looking on you when you're doing something different with the middle child, and the middle child is looking on when you're doing something, but each child was different. And as you got a little bit more parent savvy, you thought, that was actually silly to be so stubborn about that particular thing. I'm going to be a bit more flexible.
To make sure, still this is a grudge. I had to be in bed by 7 o'clock on Sundays because I had school on Monday. And if I'd had a nap, I could then watch Touched by an Angel. But if I didn't, I couldn't. And then fast forward to siblings still awake at 9 o'clock around the same time. And the thinking was very unfair and a lot of injustice.
Absolutely. Your sisters, when they were teenagers, I eventually gave up. You remember, I was always in bed before them. I just gave up. It was like their brains were wired differently, and maybe they were hyped up on their cell phones. But so and so is on their phone. They have their phone until this time. I think I would have done a lot more control around cell phone for sure.
And any closing thoughts?
Um, in later years, I've come to an such a deep awareness of how important time in nature is, and I would really encourage us. I love the fact when you're taking Haley to Elfin for walks with other moms and getting outdoors, because nature is so nurturing and so life giving. So I would encourage your listeners to include that as part of their weekly routine with their children. And lastly, just to say, overthinking and overanalyzing and worrying about all the things that could possibly go wrong for your children, it steals so much joy from your life. And if you can try to be intentional about knowing, okay, I am concerned about this, and these are the things that I'm going to try and put in place, and then I'm going to just let go. When you're waking up at 2 in the morning and you're worrying and worrying about things, most of those things are never going to happen. So just try to really be intentional about not worrying. Have some phrases that you repeat to yourself when you catch yourself worrying, to get yourself out of that, and just because that really does it blinds you to all the joy and the simple joys that are around being a parent.
Cool. I think that's very helpful and you offer a lot of good advice and nuggets of wisdom as you kind of reflect on the younger years of being a mom, because it's not like you're not a mom anymore. We still here all the time, if not more so now that they're grandchildren. But yeah, thank you so much for chatting with me. Um, it's been good to hear a little more about your thoughts around the earlier years of us growing up. And yeah, I mean, we everyone makes mistakes, we learn as we go, each child is different, and yeah, and it's, as you say, just trying to be mindful and present, I guess, because if you're worrying all the time, you're not being present. And that coupled with Instagram and social media all over the place, it's hard to be present. So trying to limit that too, I think, can do a world of good. But yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I appreciate your time chatting with me.
Thank you, Brittany. It was a real privilege, and thank you for asking me. And I'm just absolutely blown away about how you and Simon are navigating parenthood. You are really doing a fantastic job, and I'm extremely proud of you. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, and we couldn't do it without you and all the family behind us. It really does take a village. But yeah, thanks. And that's that for this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. Something different again, a more reflective piece of, chatting to a mom who has navigated the earlier years and the teen years and now has adult children, my mom. But it was good to get her perspective and hear a little bit more about her experience in more detail. Because obviously I would have had my experience of growing up with her as my mother, but to hear her kind of side of the story in a sense and a bit more from her perspective. But yeah, assuming I don't get worse, there will be another episode next week. And yeah, hoping to get back into the regular weekly rhythm. If you've enjoyed this, it'd be really great if you could share with others so I can just get the word out. And also just be encouragement to keep this going. So if you are enjoying it, leave a comment. I'd love to chat with you. As I said before, I'm always here. And hope you have a great week, and we will chat soon.